The world is facing a climate crisis, the impact of which is already clear to see. But it is not a crisis that is being shared equally. It is a crisis of racial and social injustice. Pollution, worsening air quality, rising sea levels, all have a greater impact on some of society's most marginalized groups, who don't have access to the same policy-making power to shape our response to the climate crisis. I'm Nani Jansen Reventlow, the founder of Systemic Justice, an NGO which works to radically transform how the law works for communities fighting for racial, social, and economic justice. In this series, we'll look at 3 dimensions to the climate crisis: air quality, rising sea levels, and the cost of the green transition. We'll explore how communities are fighting for justice as the world comes to terms with the rapidly changing climate.
Air pollution is a health threat in all countries, but especially for vulnerable groups in low and middle-income countries with poor air quality due to urbanization and rapid economic development, and air pollution in the home caused by cooking, heating, and lighting. Today, we're proud to launch the updated WHO Global Air Quality Guidelines, which provide clear evidence of the damage air pollution inflicts on human health.
Air is obviously vital. We need it to survive. But when it comes to quality, not everybody breathes the same air. Across the globe, marginalized communities are forced to breathe poorer quality air and face the health consequences.
We're going to head to Thailand now and take a look at air pollution there. 10 million people were thought to have sought treatment for illnesses linked to air pollution last year.
Air pollution is worse than war, smoking and AIDS put together. That's according to some new research that's come out.
Schools and colleges have again been closed in the Indian capital, New Delhi, due to poor air quality. And closer to home, there were protests in the Serbian capital, Belgrade, over air pollution just this week. It's Europe's most polluted big city.
In London, air pollution from congested roads can kill. It's particularly bad for children who are forced to live near roads and breathe toxic particles from vehicles on their way to and from school. Children like Ella Kissi-Debrah, the daughter of a teacher, Rosamund, who lived in Lewisham in southeast London.
The 9-year-old girl who died following an asthma attack has become the first person in the UK to have air pollution listed as a cause of death.
Evidence emerged showing that the area where Ella lived in, at Lewisham, she lived about 5 minutes or so from the South Circular Road, and that's one of the busiest and the most congested roads in the capital. And the evidence showed that there were dangerous levels of air pollution in that area, and it's what caused Ella's death.
After a long legal campaign by her mother and a second inquest, a coroner today ruled that excessive air pollution was a cause of her death.
But attempts to clean up the air faced strong opposition. The mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, introduced an ultra-low emission zone for the city, the largest of its kind in the world.
The decision to expand the ULEZ was a difficult one, but a vital one because of the public health crisis caused by the consequences of air pollution.
But measures like this have become part of a wider culture war.
I don't agree with ULEZ. We think it's a money grab at its highest. It's really affecting the middle class people who work really, really hard.
People are just bored of it. They want it to end.
It became a political punching bag.
It is disappointing that the mayor, backed by the leader of the opposition, is choosing not to listen to the public. The zone is being expanded against the overwhelming views of residents and businesses, and I'd urgently consider the mayor and the gentleman opposite to be on the side of hard-working Londoners.
So how are communities and activists fighting back? Rosamund Kissi-Debrah spoke to us about her daughter Ella and the campaign sparked by her death, which inspired musicians like Love Ssega to continue the fight for clean air.
Ella is my eldest daughter. She was the eldest of 3, and she was born in 2004 and sadly deceased in 2013. And I think she's typical of firstborns, actually. Firstborns are quite, you pump a lot of effort into your firstborn, don't you? There are more photographs of the firstborn than any of the other children. There are in my house, but that's a whole nother ball game. And she was really, it's like when I look back now, or when I talk about her with her siblings, we always hear about her kind of asthma and how horrendous it was, but it wasn't every second of the day. And despite all that, she still managed to have a relatively normal life, i.e. you could put her life into thousands of kids in South London. They go swimming, they do gymnastics, they love school. She did. One thing that stood out, I say, will be her musicality. From a very young age, Ella was very good at music. So that really stood out.
I'm Love Ssega. I'm a musician and an artist. And also through my art, I am an activist. There was a call out looking for more marginalised voices to use art or culture in some shape or form to get involved in climate activism. And it was in the lead up to COP26, because as we know, the climate movement here in the UK is quite white and middle class. And I had heard the story a few years before of Ella Kissi-Debrah, and that resonated with me because being a young black schoolgirl dying off the South Circular, and I thought, I went to primary school off the South Circular, so did my sisters, so did my neighbours.
I think the South Circular was unique because London is busy all over. I think anyone who doesn't live in London, when you first come, you'll be surprised by the amount of traffic. So I wouldn't say most roads stood out, but the South Circular did. I call it the gateway to Dover because, you know, all the trucks, they have to pass through there to get to Dover. But I was always bothered about the noise rather than pollution. I didn't know anything about pollution, but noise, you know, these huge trucks, you couldn't help but hear. So that's what I was more bothered about. I've got to be honest with you.
Welcome to our world. Is this the place that South London voiceless speak? 'Cause I can't see them past these non-existent headlines.
In Lewisham, people who don't know, Lewisham around the South Circular, there's a strong black community here. So we're the ones affected by the pollution, whereas we don't create it. For people who aren't so familiar with London, they probably know the M25, which is a massive motorway which goes around the edge of London. And then halfway in between, we've got this North Circular and the South Circular, which are orbital routes, which sort of split up London. And in the north, it's almost like a mini motorway. But then in the south, especially where I live and where I grew up, it's just an old Victorian road. It looks like a normal road, but then you've got these big, heavy goods vehicles going down there. You've got buses going down there. You've got all the traffic. You've got normal cars going down there. So it's a lot of traffic and pollution, which are going on all these old Victorian roads and causing so much pollution to communities who are normally from racialized groups. And also socioeconomically, you look and you say, okay, why does the road go through this area, but then misses out a very nice, privileged part of South London? Why is that?
I sometimes ask myself questions. How come they didn't tell us all this before? And not the other day, but quite a while ago, someone was challenging my credibility because they were saying, I can't believe you didn't know about that. And I was like, where were you 15 years ago? None of us knew. The scientists did. No one's denying that. And at Ella's inquest, we knew the scientists did. But I think every week, every fortnight, there's a story now about air pollution. So people can't quite believe that 15 years ago, that wasn't the case. I mean, go back 15 years. And I still think it really landed with people during COVID. I still think when I used to go out before COVID and talk about clean air, there was a whole generation of people who didn't really know what clean air was. And it wasn't until lockdown happened in COVID that people were like, oh, we can hear the birds. Oh, we could. Seriously. But people struggle with that. Like, what, you didn't know? The doctors didn't know? When Ella was alive, we never knew. That's one of the whole arguments. I never knew that, and I'm not going to pretend now. We thought it might be, because she kept on having hypoxic seizures, we were looking at epilepsy, cystic fibrosis. I know that's a long shot. No, we did not think about air pollution.
So it's these type of things where you realise, hold on a minute, there are some political reasons behind it. There are some legal reasons why some communities have protected themselves more than other communities. How can we do something about it? And how do we say, when we're talking to communities and say, look, actually, there are some things where government do have a role in deciding why this road goes here. And if we're telling to our young people, oh, try and catch public transport, try and catch the bus, let's say, what good is it if the bus stop is there and you've got all these diesel lorries and everything just piling past? And that's what they have to inhale when they're getting from school.
We don't need hyperbole or distractions. Give us the facts, we don't want the factions. We have the people, we have the stories. Show us the pictures, not allegories.
The inquest showed me that they had all these initiatives, but no one knew about it. If you had asthma, then maybe. So that's what the government were trying to claim. We were doing something about it, but who did you tell? So things were there, but nobody knew about it. So one of the things I looked in was walk to school. And when I looked into walk to school, I was trying to be honest and see whether air pollution was part of that. No. When Ella walked to school, it was about fitness and all that. It had nothing, air pollution. So we had to go back to look at the walk to school program, seriously, and to see whether air pollution was mentioned in that program. There were many other things that were mentioned, encourage kids to walk to school, but air pollution wasn't part of it. And it was so weird going back. And she had all these walk to school badges that she was really proud of, but they were not for air pollution.
I came into this completely accidentally, and it's just because having this commission and writing this song, Our World, Fight for Air, and seeing the reception that it had. It resonated more than some of my other songs, which I was singing and going to another audience. But then this had a broad cross-section of ages and different backgrounds of people resonating with this song. And it was great because when we made the video for it, it gave me a chance to show off Lewisham, because you never see Lewisham in general popular culture. And this was a chance where I could show, yes, we got the black community, but then we've got Turkish community, Chinese community, we've got South Asian community, we've got all these different people. And I asked them, I'd written a song and I said, do you want to be in this music video to say, do you care about your air? And he was like, yes, they do.
Ella's Law came out of me being triggered. There was an environmental act, I think it was 2021, if I'm right. I got really excited. I get carried away. I was thinking, yeah, they're going to recognise the Prevention of Future Death report. They're going to do something about PM 2.5. Of course they didn't. So it was in response to the government's non-action. It will require us to adopt the WHO targets. It also looks at both indoor and outdoor air. So for a long while, we did concentrate on outdoor air because it was so bad. But during COVID, we all spent about 98% of our time indoors. And suddenly we had to look at the air we were breathing indoors. And it's not great either. So it will look at both of those, WHO guidelines as well. And also what it will do is it will give us our rights. So to have our human rights to say that we should be able to breathe clean air. I think during COVID, nitrogen dioxide went down, quite rightly, but PM 2.5 didn't go down. It's the worst. It's tiny little particles that you can't see with the naked eye, and they're from emissions in cars, and you can take them in via your nostrils, and they're that tiny they can go into your bloodstream. So on high air pollution days, people can have heart attacks, asthma attacks, those sorts of things, but you can't see it with the naked eye. If PM 2.5 can't go down during lockdown, then we have a serious problem. The air is cleaner since the 1950s, hell yes. But what we are breathing in now, we can't see it. So it's not as clean as people think. Whenever people challenge me on this one, all I answer to them and I say is water clean? And people are like, okay, where should you go with this? Because my point is, people can see water's dirty and they haven't cleaned it, have they? So what makes you think they'll clean up air? We are now out of the EU, so we're not under any obligation to adopt WHO guidelines. Shameful it is. Anyway, I think certain people know I'm talking at them. It is shameful.
Some people can create music and that's where they find their enjoyment and that's where they can get their message across. Other people is a coming together where it's like, I like this music and then now I can find similar like-minded people creatively, culturally, by just coming along just to dance. Dance can be a form of rebellion and expression and comfort. Also, it's a way of saying, look, there's a tricky issue and we're coming towards this. We need some joy because it might be negative now, the levels of pollution in London, that's negative. But then if you can find a tribe to say, here's a group of people who are trying to do something in a positive way, then you find your level, because sometimes people just need some soothing and some comfort to say, yeah, it's okay, but we're trying to figure out a way to overcome this. And then the bonus is, whilst everyone is there together, then you don't know who, it could be the breakdancer who comes up with a solution or the message to get through to politicians or to get through to councillors or whoever. It might be that one person just by virtue of either it's through dancing, whether it's eating food together, whether it's through, celebrating, then that person might come and find the answer.
We spend a lot of money on our health service. The government pumps billions into it. If they use some of that money to clean up the air, it could be a win-win. But I do believe it is our human right to breathe clean air. And I believe Ella's rights were taken away from her. That's how I feel.
That was Rosamund Kissi-Debrah, Love Ssega, and his song Our World, Fight for Air, commissioned by Season for Change. We've heard the impact this has been having on young people, and in demanding action, it has been young people around the world who've been some of the loudest voices. At the 2019 World Mayor Summit in Copenhagen, Hilda Fabiana Kabuye, founder of Fridays for Future Uganda, explained why.
I am missing my classes right now, same way I have missed them for the last 6 weeks to create climate awareness. It's not a surprise because I once missed 3 months of school due to the effects of climate change we experienced in my family and community. And my father wasn't able to raise my tuition fees. I am a victim of this whole climate crisis, and I am not ashamed to say so.
Marginalised communities across Europe face the worst living conditions, including the air they breathe. Among them are Roma communities. Terezia Rostas is a Romani campaigner from Romania and the founder of Welcoming Cultures and Care for Young People's Future, a charity in the UK. I asked her to tell me about some of the history of the Roma communities in Europe.
The Roma community is one of the largest ethnic groups in Europe. It's over 12 million in Europe at the moment living, and they are some of the most underserved group that faced some of the hugest inequalities in all aspects. You can find the Roma community in most of the countries. We have migrated from northern India more than 1,000 years ago. I am from the Gabor community, which is quite a traditional community in Romania, and they predominantly live in the rural side, which takes us to today's podcast's theme as well, the air that we breathe, and how beautifully that kind of reflected as part of my childhood, and then the things that have changed once that we have decided to live permanently in a city.
Thank you very much. We started this episode with a case study that looked at how in the UK, in particular, the areas where marginalised communities live are impacted by poor air quality. You were just referring to moving into cities and that connection. Can you tell us a little bit more about how air quality impacts Roma communities?
Yeah, sure. I think the Roma community is predominantly more likely to face inequalities when it comes to air pollution. The socioeconomic factors that are kind of some of the main issues when it comes to air pollution in some of the Eastern European countries, including in my home country as well, are quite huge. So I would say clean air is not just an environmental concern, it's also a significant challenge and a human rights issue for the Roma community across Eastern and Central Europe. We're still facing a systematic marginalization where the Roma communities often reside in areas that are characterized by high levels of air pollution due to industrial activities. Also, when you think about the waste management, how inadequate it is, and the substandard housing conditions. And this is what I mean by systematic marginalization. But also, poor air quality poses serious health risks to the Roma community, like the life expectancy in our community is like 15, 20 years less. If we wanted to address all these issues, we need to look into improving the environmental regulations, which takes us back to the legal structure, but also to how do we address all these systematic inequalities for a community that often doesn't have a voice and don't even have the knowledge on how to tackle or how to fight against these inequalities.
There's an element in there about intersectionality, how these different factors are coming together and are disproportionately burdening Roma communities with the impact that air pollution has. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. How is that manifesting itself day to day?
There are areas where if you were to ask them what's on your doorstep, there is very limited access to green spaces because of the fact that they've decided to do so many buildings. There's also, in these areas, they're facing huge air pollution from the vehicles. That if you go in other areas, there might be like a specific route that would avoid going really close to the community settlements but in these areas where I'm telling you, they every single minute, they are constantly exposed to all sorts of large vehicles or small vehicles that are keep on using those areas to go across the city. Also regarding lung health and how the Roma community is more likely to suffer from chronic lung health, again, due to the air pollution. And I've shared with you that I'm also a nature connector, and I used to work with 9 medical centers, and I had patients from Slovakia and from Romania as well. And I can say that as soon as they were traveling abroad, were the ones that they were living in a village, their well-being, their health, their lung health, their breathing was improving immediately. And then as soon as they were coming into this terraced housing, no access to green space, limited language, pressed by, all sorts of financial restraints, it affected their health immediately.
People are resisting, right? So people are fighting back against many systems of oppression and also the ones that manifest themselves in this way. Can you share with us something about your own activism in this space?
During the pandemic, we started to co-create a book called Roma Reuse, Recycle, Reimagine. And that was a book co-created with a few cities with children from Slovakia, Romania, Hungary, in the UK, Roma and non-Roma. And we've all learned about the climate justice, we've all learned about the pollution and how important it is to care about our nature and the places that we live in. And as a result of that, we've had the book that was co-created, offered in all the schools in our city in Sheffield in the UK, but also at global level. And that inspired us to co-create a video in Romanes, in Hungarian, in Slovakian, in English. And from there, the children and the adults continued to learn about climate justice. What we also do, we took the Roma women to different trips at the countryside. And that's when it was quite emotional for them because they wrote a journal. Mm-hmm. And they all shared with us the feeling of how it used to be when they were younger at home, on how the air pollution wasn't such a big problem back in time, and actually how much they are missing this in today's days.
What gives you hope in this context?
What gives me hope is the fact that I'm starting as a Roma woman with my children and with our networks to be part of those places where people don't expect us to be. And that gives me hope to know that our young people are starting to fight for their rights when it comes to climate justice, and they are keeping people accountable. And I think that's the sparkle that we need, and just making those small changes in our life that honor the things that we should be grateful for when it comes to climate justice. As a Roma woman and the Roma community, we are very connected to nature because we had to become nomadic, so we constantly had to travel. And including our flag, the symbols from our flag has blue on top, which represents the sky, green, which represents the grass, and then you have the 16 red spoken chakra. And that means it and relates our connection to the sky, to the grass, the earth, and also to the fact that we want to feel free. The point is to show that everyone's life matters and we shouldn't shorten anybody's life due to all these decisions that are taken that are contributing to air pollution. And so it is, I would like to say that in conclusion, this is a fundamental human right that I would like to see it, and I have hopes that it's not going to be one of those ones that is continuing to fail when it comes to the Roma community.
Thank you to Terezia Rostas, Rosamund Kissi-Debrah, and Love Ssega. In the next episode,
that monster hurricane, the strongest ever on record in the Atlantic Ocean, slamming into the Caribbean already, turning deadly, ravaging islands. Just listen to the sound as it slams St. Martin. An extremely powerful storm, so many islands getting hammered.
Sea levels are rising and the communities sinking are demanding action. We'll speak to campaigners across the world on why the global north needs to meet its responsibilities. This has been Whose Planet, the Climate Justice Podcast, a podcast from Systemic Justice, produced by Tortoise Media. The producer was Adrian Bradley. Find out more about systemic justice and our work at systemicjustice.ngo.